Welcome everybody. Are we ready for Emil to drop some nuggets?
Yeah.
Today's knowledge nugget is about dealing with conflict. We've been talking about conflict for the past couple knowledge nuggets. And the process of dealing with conflict, like we talked about the first time, is we just aren't trained how to deal with the conflict when conflict kicks in. And so what ends up happening is we start saying things, we start responding in ways that takes us down a rabbit hole, and then it's not productive. We just don't get anywhere. We don't get traction. And so we end up having conversations that get us nowhere fast. And then we just recycle and we do it again later. So the process of dealing with conflict, especially since there hasn't been a lot of strategies over the past several thousand years on how to deal with conflict, we're going to dial in how to completely manage the conflict. And the way I want you to think about it is, if you've ever been, before COVID, if you ever went to like a football game or a basketball game where there's a huge parking lot, and you have those guys in their orange vests and their cone flashlights, right? They're directing you where to go. And so what ends up happening is while you're driving the car, they're telling you where to go. So in communication, we can be the people that have the flashlights and the vests, guiding the conversation where we want it to go. Not because we got our hands behind the wheel, but because we're using psychodynamics and relational strategies to guide that conversation to where we want it to go. We can't control them, but guess what? We can influence it. So there's two main ways, if you can kind of see behind me. When we're dealing with conflict, when we're dealing with these intense emotional issues, I know that almost everybody who's been into a wilderness program or has been to some other program learn the I statements. We learn I statements and reflective listening. We do that. The problem is even though we are trained to use I statements, the world has not yet embraced I statements. Okay? And so it is not effective to call a timeout in the middle of a conversation and point out how the other person is violating the I statement rule. That has never, okay, maybe it has worked, but in the people that I talk with, that hasn't been very effective. So pointing out how the other person is violating the I statement rule usually doesn't turn into a productive conversation. So we need to prepare for statements that do not start and are created perfectly with the I statements. So here's how we do this. Last week we talked about the blame game, winning the blame game. How do we do that? Well, when the blame is pointed on you because you did this or you did that or you always or you never or you think or you want, as soon as that phrase starts with the word you, that's a criticism, okay? In your mind you think, oh, that's a criticism. And how do I respond to that criticism? By, if it's greater than 0% true, okay, anything above 0, we agree with the element of truth. Nothing more, nothing less, okay? That's it. We say what's true. Now, we maximize it, we don't minimize it, okay? If it's 0% true, we say, what do you mean? Why would you say that? That's all we do. That's our rule for dealing with the blame. Okay? But however, there are some times they're not going to do the blame. They're going to say something like, this is one of those things that I find really difficult for a lot of parents and therapists to deal with, because one of the things that happens is we're trying to get our teenagers to communicate, period. Okay? We want them to communicate. And what happens is, in an effort to support them advocating for themselves, we don't put a lot of guidelines or structure in how they start to share their feelings. They may do it super spicy. They may do it with a blend of blame. So here they are communicating their truth, all right, their experience. And what we're counseled to do is to be with them in their moment of pain, frustration, disappointment, hurt, whatever. The problem is we're not trained on how to do that. So I call this the declaration response. When a person shares their feelings, their frustration, their point of view, and it's not blaming you, in other words, it's about their experience or the situation. If it's their experience or the situation, we call that a declaration. They're talking about their feelings. When we get them communicating, now notice, they're not going to do it the right way. It's going to be spicy and exaggerated, whatever. Don't worry about it. It's totally okay. You got this. All we do is we capture the emotion that they're expressing. All right? What is the emotion? What's the emotion they're expressing? Now, sometimes the emotion, that's not the right way to capture it. Sometimes the context of the interaction is more their attitude. So sometimes it's emotion, sometimes it's an attitude. Let me give you an example of one of each. I'm sick of this, Mom. I'm tired of it. What's that? I think most of you could say, gosh, Emo, you're really frustrated. You're really angry. Those would be some emotions. Those are declarations, right? But there's another declaration about the situation that has less to do with my emotion and more to do with my attitude, like this. That's not what I said. That's not even close to what I said. Okay, notice, in that one, the attitude is that you seem convinced, or you're certain that you didn't say that. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one it is. Just give it your best shot. Because if you're wrong, it's okay, because they'll correct you most likely. Capture the emotion, connect it to their experience. We don't try to sort through what's true or what's not true, what's fact, what's not fact in this situation. Now, some people say, well, the facts aren't relevant. They are definitely relevant. Making decisions on bad information is an issue. It's a problem. But at this stage, we're not trying to correct them because they don't have an open mind anyway. In this situation, all we're trying to do is help them feel understood. So we capture the emotion or attitude. If we can label it, we label it, and then we connect it to what they experience. I'll use words like because you think, or because you felt like, or even though that doesn't make a lot of sense when we're not even talking about feelings, because you believe. Those are the words I might use when I don't agree with what they describe as the reality. But if they're describing something that I totally agree with, then I'm going to acknowledge that because I did, or because that did happen. I can see why you'd be frustrated because I did tell you no. I did raise my voice. I did blame you, and it wasn't your fault. I can totally see why you're frustrated. Because if it's true and I say something like, I can see why you'd be really frustrated because you think that I blamed you. Well, if you blamed him, then you just own that. Otherwise, it comes across being very evasive. So this 1-2 punch, this part kind of traps them cognitively. Like if they've been validated with their objective reality. You did this, you did that. You were agreeing with the element of truth. This helps them feel validated in terms of object reality. That stops them and creates beautiful confusion. Dealing with the declarations is the juice of connection. When there is a sense of understanding, not agreement, when there's a sense of understanding, that's when an emotional bond starts to take place. That's the connection. We maximize whatever we can kind of sink our teeth into that's true. We really lean into their experience, knowing that we don't have to agree with it, to help them feel understood. Once they feel understood, and they can kind of tell that you don't agree, well, that's when confusion kicks in. And that sets us up for this empty spot right here, okay? Which we'll be talking about next time is how do we deal with the questions that they start to ask? There's really only 3 sets. Now, I could throw in here, when someone's angry, agitated, frustrated, and they're starting to lose control, one of the other statements that they're going to add, and we treat it the same way, is a command. Mind your own business. Leave me alone. Shut the door. Be quiet. Okay, those are commands. A command is a directive ordering you to do something. We treat it the same way. We capture the emotion, we connect it to what they experience, and once that happens, if we do a good job, then it will create a sense of connectedness. And in the connectedness is now that opportunity for us to create a correction. Connect before you correct. Okay, so here's what's going to happen when we do the questions. And we'll talk about this next time, but the questions is just a redirection. Once they get information, it'll go right back into here, or a criticism. When you think about processing someone's feelings, a past event, this is what we're talking about. In the dialogue, 2 main things are going to happen. Criticisms, blame, declarations, and the experience that they have. Until we have processed all of their thoughts through this, it will not go away. It will resurface over and over again. And that's why people hash and rehash. I'll give you a quick example. Some of you have already experienced this. When the statement is, you forced me to come here to fill in the blank treatment center. You're absolutely right. Against your will, I had you go to this program. In fact, I had goons pick you up, put you in the car, and drive you there. That is true, 100% true. What are they going to say? Well, now they're going to shift into, I don't feel like that's fair. That's a bunch of bullcrap. I shouldn't have to be here. And what do we normally do? We start explaining ourselves. As soon as we begin to explain ourselves, we get sucked into the rabbit hole. So instead of explaining ourselves, let's let them share their frustration, their hurt, their disappointment. Let's be there with them. And how do we do that? We capture the emotion, connect it to what they experience, and just be there with them. We can be there with them. We know what it would be like. That would suck. Until they ask the question, why, they're not going to listen to any explanation we give anyway. So don't worry about it. Let them know that you're going to love them and support them in their frustration, even when they think that you're the source of their pain and misery. Because as soon as you buy into having to explain yourself, guess what? You've just validated the idea that it's your fault that they're suffering. Now, they're into the rabbit races, okay? So this is how we deal with the second most popular statement in conflict, and that's declarations. When they share their feelings and they're advocating for themselves, This is how we take control to help them focus on their issues of what they need to do to overcome the barriers that are in their life.